Good to
Art, it's great to see you.
same here.
Um, First, on behalf of USTA New England, thank you so much for being a part of this new series. Um, we are so excited to talk to you today and learn a little bit more about your book, which is absolutely fantastic. I read it last summer and I was just floored by all the detail and the photos, and it was very, very cool, especially if you like history, which
Right.
I definitely do. And so to have that whole tennis history is just amazing. So
Good source
um
material, you know.
yeah, so why don't we start by you telling us your tennis story and how you came about the game.
Okay, so I'm from Elizabeth, New Jersey, and I was born in 1947. 1947 is the year Jackie Robinson entered, professional baseball. And so I lived in a neighborhood where there was two clay courts called the North End Tennis Club. And these two courts were some of the earlier courts built in America. And that's where I began my tennis, at this North End Tennis Club. And it was a small black tennis club. And in 1957, Althea Gibson was also #1 in the world. So I actually thought tennis was a black game. I didn't see any white tennis players. I didn't know that white people played tennis. So in my little world, I thought that tennis was a black game. So, that's how I got started in tennis. It wasn't until I had strokes and was supposedly a player, a young player beginning to, once I left the club and began to branch out and play in tournaments outside the club, then I found out that it was like, you're not supposed to be playing the game. Who are you? That's how I got started with my project, because people always want to know, who are you? How did you, it was such an anomaly to be a black tennis player, so they thought. So anyway, that's where I started, the small black club.
um how did you make it to New England?
Well, my wife is from East Hampton, Massachusetts, and I went to Hampton University. I met her at Hampton. And so the first 10 years after graduation, I was a tennis coach pro in New Jersey. And then I started a summer camp at Hampshire College in Amherst, Mass. And then we decided to move up here permanently. So
Very cool.
I've been living up in this area since 1980.
That's awesome. So I feel like you're a New England native. That's how I feel. I know you're from New Jersey, great, yeah. Eastern, but we're gonna claim you to New England name.
I claim it also. All right.
So let's dive into the book a little bit. What inspired you to write the book in the first place?
Well, like I said, as a tennis player, as a young tennis player, people, black people, white people, black players, they would always ask me, how'd you start in the game? And so, for years I would tell a story when I was young about my home club, and then I would talk about the American Tennis Association. And so as I got older, once I was an adult and began teaching tennis into my livelihood, I wanted to show people how tennis was looked at in the black community, back in the day when it was in its glory days, and before, before golf clubs really opened up, tennis was really the social recreation event for African American, as what we would think would be at least middle class.
Mm-hmm. I know, because I noticed when you look in the book, you can really, and through the photos, you can see what a social activity it seemed to be. I sometimes think that with so much focus on the US Open and the competition, and we talk a lot about tournaments and, how to improve your game and stuff, I think one of the really fun things about your book is through photos, and obviously your words too, but it shows that camaraderie, that, community coming together, having fun. So do you have any fun personal stories from back when you came up growing up playing tennis?
The way the American Tennis Association ran, it was state-wide, then we had region, then we had nationals. we mirrored the USTA. And so, I went from tournaments locally, then I began to go regionally, then I began to go nationally. And these national tournaments were on Black college campuses. So you got a chance to really be in an education-oriented environment. Tennis in the Black community started with the Black business people, doctors, community that wanted to mirror the educated white community. This was our educated community. And so we wanted to do, if you went to a white school, you might have had tennis courses. You still had to go back into segregation. If you went to a Black college, you still had to go back into segregation. So these people wanted these things that they got used to going to college and so, and they wanted a better life and a healthier life. And so that's where tennis, played that role and filled that, because, you don't need much space for tennis. Like people think you don't need that much money. You don't need that much space. So tennis became, like at Tuskegee, Booker T. Washington made tennis the sport of the campus. That was back in 1890.
I did not know that. That's so cool.
Started back way then.
So
well, let me finish this point for 1 second. So what we have, what really hurt the development of tennis in the Black community are all these individual stars. So we have stars instead of clubs now. And so instead of having healthy clubs in communities, we have individuals who parents helped them pursue tennis on a high performance level. And that's what represents Black tennis now. So you don't have as many Black tennis players because you don't have the same kind of community minded. Tennis was once a real citizenship building. I mean, there's a lot of Art Carringtons that I grew up with that are successful, had a chance to go to college. Every national Black champ that I knew was a college educated person. So it wasn't kind of like the Negro Baseball League where the guys was transcending, trying to go into Major League Baseball, or where you started baseball in the fields in Alabama. Most of the Black tennis players were college educated. And they started it for recreation, and the good players came with their children. Second, third generation tennis players became better and better. But our first original Black tennis players were adults pursuing healthy recreation.
Mm-hmm. So growing up in the game and looking at it, you mentioned, going back into segregation. How have you seen the changes, or have there been changes for you within the sport as far as making it more fair and equitable?
Well, like I said, there's a lot more people trying to pursue tennis as a profession. And whereas when I came along, going to college with tennis was really like a profession. That was a profession. You come from where I came from, a scholarship to Hampton, what was better? There was nothing greater than that. So now we got a lot of kids foregoing college and trying to go straight on the tour. And, that really is a major difference. Because I've seen a lot of young girls, my granddaughter's a player. I've seen a lot of young girls turn down opportunities to go to college to go on the tour. And they're really not coming from community-based programs where they have a really good support system. Most of the time, these decisions have got to be made by their parents. A lot of pressure, what do you do? So with this COVID, my granddaughter's really happy that she's in school because everything is at a standstill. She's like, imagine if it's not easy, not playing, not being on tour, and you're not in school. So I'm for tennis first. I think that the way I came up into tennis was a family atmosphere. Most of the time, the junior tennis players came from an adult family person that introduced them. That's where our players come. So very seldomly, you're going to see a little Black kid that comes home and says, I want to go play tennis. A lot of times, tennis is not close enough. You need courts that are close in the neighborhood that a kid can ride his bike and get to. The way tennis is set up now, if the courts are a long ways away, then you need a parent to drive you to the courts. So now you need a whole different mechanism to just access tennis. Whereas if you have, like was fortunate, I had 2 little courts in the neighborhood, and boom, you get 3 situations.
We at USTA New England, we totally get that. We have a new tennis in the parks program that COVID is putting a little bit of a derailment with, but we're really excited to start reinvigorating our public parks with tennis.
Right.
It's been on top of mind for a long time, so it's so great to hear you talk about how important, you know, your local courts are. You know, definitely encourage people just get out and play. I mean, I've actually seen, you know, when I go out for walks, like I've seen courts that have never been used. Now finally there's people playing on them because tennis is one of the safe sports during this pandemic time. So that's been exciting.
And people need to know, so you can play tennis in a very light way, or you can play some real vigorous tennis. So you can, you know what I mean? It depends on, you know, which end, where you want to be with it. You can kind of choose it, but you don't have a choice in playing adult football. I mean, it's just certain adult things that you can't do, but you can do tennis. And then you can do it male, female, adult, child, you know, so just so many different variables with tennis. But like I said, you can go light or you can go heavy at it. So that's the beauty of the game.
Yeah. So wanted to ask you about just your overall involvement with USTA New England. How long have you been involved with us, and have you seen any positive changes since you've started your journey?
Since I talked to you, I completely forgot that I was on the board. That when there was a president by the name of Trish Arnold, I was a president's appointee to the board of, you know, the board of trustees of New England Tennis. And also I received the highest community service award from New England Tennis. So, you know, I've got some pretty good acknowledgement from New England Tennis myself. I'm really glad to see that you're out front with this, trying to make an effort to, because I really would like to participate in trying to grow the game in communities where it's not as well known grown. I also have a collection of like Maria Bueno, who was a Brazilian star in the late 50s going into the 60s, and Alex Olmedo, who was Ecuadorian. He was #1 in America. And, you know, so I've over the years, I have a collection that consists of diversity outside of just Black. I have the first Filipinos that played in major. Filipino community participated in the American Tennis Association from the very beginning. It's amazing how multicultural the American Tennis Association National Championship in 1920 had, you know, a champion come from Jamaica. His name was B.M. Clark, and he was the first player to play in Wimbledon in 1924. And then George Stewart, who was a Panamanian, became an ATA champ in 1947 when Althea Gibson became, and he was the first Black to play in the NCAA championship. He was actually sponsored into the country by a Jewish organization. It's an amazing story. So the American Tennis Association was a diversity organization. It wasn't just, you know, people don't understand. We had Nicaraguan woman champions after Althea. It was not just a Black thing. It filled the diversity spot. You wanted to be comfortable and play tennis, and you weren't, you know, white Anglo-Saxon, there's a good chance you'll be comfortable coming to an ATA event.
And I think that's such another cool, I don't think that's in your book in particular, but I think that's such an amazing.
Well, stuff in it, but when I do an exhibit, When I do an exhibit, I highlight certain things, like Alice Marble went to Harlem to play an exhibition with another woman, and Mary Hardwick, who was #1 in England, and Alice Marble was #1 in America and the world. And they went to Harlem to play an exhibition, and that's where Althea Gibson first saw a woman that she could emulate. Prior to that, Althea emulated nothing but men tennis players, Black men tennis players. That's what she saw. And then Alice Marble came to Harlem, which was real proactive in 1944. Just like Don Budge played an exhibition in Harlem in 1940. And nobody knows the history, not even Wilson, and they sponsored the stuff. Because that's why my book is archival. Nobody knows the history. It's all hidden history now and forgotten history. And so tennis, you know, tennis did some early on things that, you know, that people don't know. They think that, well, the USTA was, you know, I mean, everything had a racial segregation component at one point. So kids just, you know, how far are you going to go with, but at the same time, like I said, in 1940, before 1947 with Jackie Robinson, this match in Harlem was promoted with the #1 player in the world, Don Budge, going against the #1 black player, Jim McDaniels, right? And then they did that again in 1944 and in 1945. So when at New York, the Cosmopolitan Tennis Club, see, there's major clubs around the country. Cosmopolitan Tennis Club in New York. Where I came up in New Jersey, the North End Tennis Club, even though it was only 2 courts, who's who in Black America came to these places. And so I got a chance to really meet heavyweight Black Americans. And, you know, like I tell my parents of my students at times that when I was growing up, all I heard was the black doctors saying Howard, Hampton, Morgan. I didn't hear Ivy League school. So you know, I wasn't geared to go in a brand name school that was what we called a white major school at the time, because all the success stories I heard came from black schools. And so I wanted to go to Hampton because that was our Harvard, you know. So and that's where I could develop, and you know, so that's just like a women's college. Brandeis, if you really, you know, if you want to have certain kind of support system, then back in those days it was really important that you went to a school where you could be supported instead of isolated. There's a rare case that can make it through isolation, but that's not the norm, you know?
So what advice would you give our youth of color today to be a history maker? Like what do you
know what
would to be a history maker, to be living history, basically, to, you know, what advice would you give them, you know, to keep them in the sport? What can they do for the game?
You know,
what do you see for the future of tennis?
I use little different things. So I tell my kids that the dot is in the infinity, but the infinity is in the dot. So the greatness is in your smallest act, right where you are in the neighborhood you're in. That's what we call acres of diamonds, that right where you are at your feet is an opportunity for you. For me, it was the tennis. I saw it, I knew I was different, and it made me fiercely independent, nonconformist. Just being once I realized that I wasn't supposed to be black and good in tennis, then I rode that baby into a life. I was like, I'm gonna be what I'm not supposed to be, and that's gonna take care of me. As long as I can be good at what I'm not supposed to be, I'm gonna have a nice life. And that's what I passed on to my son, how you can go to college. So I used to tell him, I'm gonna show you how to do what I did for myself, how to use tennis to educate yourself and to be a worldly person. And so that's, you know, I've met a lot of great people, black, white. I was thinking about some modern players, Taylor Fritz, his father, Guy and Harry Fritz, father and uncle. They're my boys going back. So I was early on in the tour, just like Arthur Ashe was a little before me, but I grew up with South African players. I grew up with Australian players. I grew up with South African guys that I related to personally before South Africa opened up, because I couldn't hold them responsible. You know what I mean? When you get in a one-on-one situation and you're out, you know, you take a person for their value. And so, you know, the growth. Tennis has been a tremendous growth factor. So I would tell, you know, young, you know, just keep growing, keep developing yourself. And you just don't know how it's gonna, I didn't know there was gonna be, let alone me go to college, down the road, end up with a granddaughter that's a tennis player, a son that was a high performance, and, you know, so, and I'm still coaching and love it. I got one of my boys here with me now that I'm bringing along, Miles Jeffries. So I think it's real important. I always have a couple kids you'll always have some white kids that you're helping because they're the nature of the game, but I think it's real important to go out your way to try to help, if you're capable, to go out your way to try to help somebody that wouldn't do it without you helping a little. It's easy to help somebody that doesn't need help. But it takes a little more effort to try to, you know, reach out and bring one along. And so I think this whole awareness initiative now, because as a coach, I know that I coach my players to develop their dominant and they're non-dominant, so we become balanced and in harmony with ourselves and one. And so I really feel like the USTA and America needs to make a greater effort to coordinate us in. That there's not been enough attempt. They haven't tried hard enough because energy goes from a big source to smaller sources. So I don't believe this pull it up by the bootstrap stuff work. You know what I'm saying? You need help. You need to stay with the physics. Plenum to vacuum. Where there's plenty, send to where there's not much. And if we just do some basic physics, we can make this thing, we can get our tennis players. But it's important to realize that trying to grow urban tennis or black tennis without growing adults with it, the adult comes first. That's the nature of the game of tennis. And most of the time, an adult brings you. Unfortunately, all the adults are bringing the kids to tennis right now to make money, to be super players. It's not, like I said, it's not enough community where you need those 5% profile people. The black kids need to see a dentist on the tennis court, a doctor, a school teacher. They need to see people on the court. See, what caught me at my eye in my little two courts, I saw the Alfa Romeos, I saw the Mercedes Benzes, I saw the Austin Healey's, I saw the Jaguars, I saw the car these black men were driving. I'm like, okay. Then I went and saw where they were living, and that really finished me off. And so I was, okay, I heard, how did you get this? School, education. And so that resonated with me. Okay, listen, I want some life like this too. I want to finish basement. I knew I'm an urban kid. I know playground life and street life, you see. But when I saw these brothers that had more, wearing the little funny white shorts, having to cook out on the weekend. See, they were cooking out and doing a whole day event. When we go to the playground and play basketball, when we leave, they were there, we come back, they're still there. It's like, okay, then we started copying that. People copy what they see. They see drug dealers, they copy that. If you stick up, they copy that. So if you want them to be tennis players, put some tennis players on the tennis court, having some fun, where people can go by and see these people having fun and say, hey, I want to do that too. I want my child to do that.
And I definitely agree that, you know, we're having bigger conversations now about all the different ways to be more supportive in our local communities. And really, you know, we've talked a lot about bringing tennis to the community, and we really need to act on it, you know, 110% more than we've ever done. And so, you know, I totally agree with you. Like, community tennis is key, and it has so much positive impact. You know, it's good for your health, it's good for relationships, it's good for kids to have better role models. There's so many
good for the community. It's really a good community builder. The tennis is really because you can participate. So often our community watches sports, they don't participate. This is about healthy recreation for the adults as well. So I think you need to draw the adults more. You need to go after more adults, and then you get more kids as a result of that. All of our top players back from the ATA days pretty much came out of family situations. One sibling, then the others, you know what I mean? But parent played, then he brought the kids, come on, let's go to tennis. And so, you know, that's how my mother used to tell me all the time, go to the tennis courts, you'll meet some nice kids, you're gonna meet some nice kids, you know what I mean? Go up to the tennis courts. And so, you know, it's still that kind of game.
So as we're winding down, I have a two-part question. First part, what is your favorite tennis memory, your personal favorite tennis memory? And then second part, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier, all this tennis memorabilia that you have. So tell me about what's your favorite tennis item. We heard your basement is filled with all things tennis. So
okay. So my favorite tennis experience was like when I went to Ohio at like 14 years old playing the ATA national tournament. My sister had been going for years, and people at my club had been trying to tell me to go. But I, you know, finally 4 or 5 of us got on a train from Newark and took this train for 10 hours out into Ohio, got out in the cornfields of Ohio and went to Central State University, a black school out there. And that's where Arthur Ashe was playing in the national tournament. And so that was like the highlight that changed my entire life. Onto the college campus, meeting other Black kids from cities all around the country, not having any kind of physical confrontation, just a whole different kind of environment. That was the most outstanding, that started my career in tennis.
Mm-hmm.
In my cellar, I have some trophies that are pretty sizable trophies that go back, showing that, I have a trophy, a 1941 trophy from a New Jersey guy, but I know that he had to ride on a segregated train to go to St. Louis, Missouri to play in this tournament. And this was the third leg that he won on the trophy. So the trophy was like 3 feet high. And his name was John Chandler. And he was one of the first Black athletes at Rutgers University back in the 1930s. And so when I think about his trophy and what he went through, that's what I try to get this young boy Miles. So he has no idea of what these guys went through to have what they have. So when he walks around the tennis court slow and is not thinking about the opportunity that his father's providing, then I got to hit him with the history. They need to know some history. You don't understand how fortunate you are. You know what I mean? And that you need to know something about your history. And what I didn't have a chance to know was there wasn't anything written like what I have. So before my book, you just couldn't go anywhere and pick up and see these articles and see, wow. So I couldn't respect my mentors the way I should have, because I didn't see anything. And so, it just comes back to, one part of me is the tennis, but there's a research guy that lives in me, like a detective that really likes to, when I first saw that Dwight Davis umpired at the ATA National Championship in 1921 in Washington, D.C., at a Black amusement park where the tournament was being held. Just imagine that. It's a Black amusement park in Washington, D.C., with tennis courts. Dwight Davis, Secretary of Army, one of them, and founder of Davis Cup. And he goes to this Black event. So that's what I'm saying. Segregation was an accepted thing, but he acknowledged and was trying to show respect by going and refereeing a semifinal match. So when I read this in the newspaper, I'm like, wow, people just don't have any idea of what the Black man has been through in America and how successful we've been despite it. Because you have to build from the affirmative. You can't build from negative. So you have to build from, all great discoveries come from seeing something work successfully. So you got to go back and look at what built tennis, what built Althea Gibson, Black Tennis Club in the community. What built Arthur Ashe, Black Tennis Club in the community. Art Carrington. It's a no-brainer. You either go back in there and do the same thing and reconstruct, but we thought that we made it with Arthur Ashe, that it was going to be a whole flow. See, the high performance kind of kills it on one level. You get hung up in this high performance thing and you forget about the growth of the whole game and how important it is and how many more people are going to be involved other than that final little tournament player.
The grassroots side of it.
Yeah. So that's what we need. Tickets. People that buy the tickets at the US Open, they're not all college scholarship tennis players.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I definitely agree. Like, you need to know your history and leverage it for your success.
You got
so it. With that final thought, what is the best way to acquire your book? The
best way to acquire my book is to email me at artcarringtontennis@gmail.com.
Perfect.
All right, did I say that? Okay.
Yeah, of course.
That's the best way to contact me for the book. Right, because
wonderful.
I'm glad you bought some books. Thank you very much. It's going to be very informative. Like I tell people, to know is to grow.
Yes, and we agree. And those books are going to staff, our board, and our NJTL chapter leaders just as a starting place. We're again having more conversations at the national level on all things diversity and inclusion. So I'm hoping there'll be an even bigger push for your book. It's absolutely fantastic. And you are just a treasure to tennis, Art. Like you're a great person, and we are indebted to you for what you've written in capturing that history. It's phenomenal read. It just really.
Thank you. And hopefully
even just the pictures alone, if you just start like flipping through it, it's so inspiring.
What I want to do with you is I do an exhibit. See, that book came as a result of me doing these exhibits. The exhibits are so much more material because I had to wind it down in the book to what am I going to put in here. But then there's so much other material that is absolutely educational because it's not just a pictorial, but it's educational, you know what I mean? And so people see Afro newspaper. They're not used to seeing anything like that. They see the words Negroes. These young kids don't have any idea of ever even using the word. How many people you know use the word Negro? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So, you know, so
it's not
anyway.
commonplace
So
today.
I hope you contact me when things open up. So let's do some things because I have some ideas.
I have some ideas too. To like, let's do this exhibition with all your tennis treasures, and we have tons. You know, we're very blessed in New England to have a really good national junior tennis and learning network. We have almost 20 chapters, and you know, they're all promoting and growing tennis to our diverse youth, and tennis and education is what they're about. And so I think we definitely can make something happen, hopefully soon.
Okay, well, then you get to me, all right?
Yes, I will, Art. Thank you so
Awesome.
much for spending some time today.
Definitely.
And we will be in touch soon.
Hey, this worked out really well, you know, from the last one. Yes.
Yeah, we'll get it together.
All
All
right.
right, Art. Thank you so much. And we'll be talking soon.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye.